residents of Bishan, Toa Payoh, and fellow Singaporeans. Good evening. My name is Bryan Long, and I'm a Singapore People's Party candidate for Bishan, Toa Payoh. Before I begin, I'd like to wish all teachers here a happy Teachers' Day. Thank you for educating our children. Thank you, teachers. I want to share my story with you tonight. In sharing my story, I hope to highlight the problems facing all of us working parents trying to raise our children in Singapore. So if you are a working parent with one or more children, I'm speaking to you. My Chinese name is Long Yao Guang. My Yao Guang is taken from Lee Kuan Yew's name. My mom wanted to name me after Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. She believed that her son will one day play a positive role in the history of Singapore. But the nurse at KK Hospital said that it would be too obvious if my name is Guang Yao. So my mom reversed the words and called me Yao Guang instead. But little did she know that her wish came true, but only that I'm now on the opposition side. So tonight is very special for me because it allows me to share with all of you how my mother's aspiration helped me get to this point. And that's just it. We parents, we have aspirations for our children. We want our children to do better and more than what we did in our lives. We want our children to be happy. I am now a happy father of 3 lovely children and a beautiful wife. And of course, I want my children to grow up in this country we call Singapore. However, today I am worried because I don't see those possibilities for my children anymore. I'm worried because I am not sure happiness is possible for my children in Singapore when they grow up. How am I going to pay for their education when they are older? How are they going to afford their own place to stay? Will they even want to stay in Singapore? Now, don't get me wrong. The Singaporeans I meet when I do my house visits for the past few years, they are rational. They are hardworking people. We don't expect the government to take care of all our needs. We will work hard. We will save hard to provide for our children. But we can only do so much for those things within our control. But can we, as citizens, control the housing prices? Can we, as citizens, control the cost of living? Can we, as citizens, control the education policies? No, we can't. Only the government and the parliament can. We can influence, of course, but we still need good members of parliament who listens, who hears, who feels our pain, and who will speak up for us in parliament fearlessly and courageously. Just like Mr. Chiam See Tong, we need people, politicians just like him. Now back to my story. My mom divorced my dad when I was 3 years old. I had no father until my mom married my stepfather when I was 12 years old. When I became a teenager, I told myself that I want to be there for my children as much as I can, and I will not be an absentee father. Now, just before my first child was born, and she's in the midst of us, I read a quote from a very successful businessman. And he said that his biggest regret is that he only knows how long his children are. He never knew how tall they were. He said that he always got home so late that he always saw his children sleeping, so he only knew how long they were. He has never come home early enough to see them stand up tall in front of them. Friends, this is not the story of just one person. It is the reality of many of us here in Singapore. Singaporeans work the longest hours in the world. Why do we do that? Cost of living is going up. We have competition from cheaper labor. We have to prove to our companies, our bosses, that we are still valuable to them. The PAP government tells us to be faster, better, and cheaper. They keep saying that we got to keep the economy growing, otherwise Singapore will go on a decline. But all this comes at a cost. The cost is on our quality of family lives. Some of the residents that I meet work such long and late hours that they have to let their children stay with the grandparents during the weekdays. It just doesn't make sense to bring the children home only to bring them back the next morning to the grandparents' place. Is this the parents' fault? Don't you think they would prefer to be with their children every day? The reality is that they have to keep their jobs, otherwise how will they support the family? The thing is that the PAP government wants to grow the economy above everything else, but in the process is killing everything else that makes Singapore a home for all of us. So my wife and I were determined to be present for our children when they are growing up. My wife became a stay-at-home mother for our first child, and I became a stay-at-home dad for our second child. It wasn't easy to do that. We were a single income family and we were tied up in our finances. For me, it was especially difficult because I had to step out of my civil service career so that I can be with my children. But I kept to my word to be there for my kids. Then my eldest daughter went to primary school. She went to primary 1, and then reality hit us. Within 2 months, just 2 months of being in primary 1, my daughter's teacher told us to get Chinese tuition for our daughter. I was shocked. Just 2 months of primary school, and already teachers are telling my wife and I to get tuition for my daughter. I thought primary 1 was supposed to be easier for children. But it turns out that though there were no exams in primary 1 and primary 2, but the teachers still know that ultimately the child still needs to take the primary school leaving exam, the PSLE. And that's when I started looking deeper at the PSLE. I realized that the PSLE seems to be the root of a lot of the stress faced by families. Now, before I carry on, I recognize that we parents can only do so much and that our children still has a responsibility to take on the journey of life themselves. I get that argument, but surely that responsibility don't begin when the child is only in primary school. The PAP says that the PSLE is an important feedback to the parents and children after 6 years of primary school, and that we need some way to allocate them to secondary schools. Of course, it is good to have a standard so that children knows how they are progressing. I believe we should keep exams and assessments so children learn how to perform under pressure. But why should we have such a high-stakes exam at 12 years old? Surely it will be obvious to teachers if a student is struggling academically. You don't need one big exam to let the child know that you're not doing well. And if every school is a good school, then why do we need the PSLE to sort out students into different schools? Exams should be used. Thank you. Exams should be used to gauge a child, to see if the child needs help. But the government is using a major exam to separate young children. Just because a child doesn't perform at 12 years old, he or she is then allocated to a lower ability stream and labeled as normal. Isn't this like the classic ugly duckling story? Or prejudging an ugly duckling which turned into a beautiful swan? I was a late bloomer. I got an average score for my PSLE. I failed my maths in secondary 2. But somehow, my brains kicked in when I was in secondary 3. And I managed to get the second highest O-level score in my school. I then went on to do well for my A-levels and then was awarded a scholarship from MINDEF. But if you were to look at my PSLE score when I was 12, you will laugh and you will say, it's a good effort, but there's nothing special about you. The PSLE is a major stress point for a lot of families. The more children you have, the more you have to stress for PSLE. It's easy to tell the parents not to be kiasu, just relax. But when you feel responsible to help your children get the most out of their lives, You naturally feel guilty when you can't offer them as much as others are giving their children. A few years back, OCBC Bank came up with a special leave scheme to allow their staff to save up their vacation leave and use it to stay home to help their children study for the PSLE. A PAP Minister of State criticized OCBC Bank in her Facebook post. She said she didn't have to do much to get her child or children through PSLE, that it was work as usual and life as normal for her, and she don't agree with what OCBC Bank did. Don't you think it shows how out of touch the ministers are? The reaction from the people was expected. People were unhappy that a government minister cannot empathize that the PSLE is actually a high-stakes game for everyone. Come on, think about it. If it's not important to the employee, why would OCBC allow them to take leave to stay home and help their children with PSLE? It's not the parents' fault. They are reacting to the education system. The education system is a pressure cooker. Unfortunately, this pressure cooker has no safety valve, and with each passing year, the pressure to do better keeps rising. I'm not sure how long more our families can take the pressure. But friends, I have good news. I believe that we can control our future. We can stop worrying and we can start acting. If we are willing to do for our children what our parents and the pioneer generation have done for us, then life in Singapore will be better than it has ever been. We will be the new pioneer generation for the next 50 years. We can make the decisions that will help our children and our children's children. And let's start by rethinking our education system. We, the SPP team, propose a change. We propose a flexible education system. Remove the PSLE, allow children to continue to pick up the essential language, mathematics, and science skills, but with a choice of going deep into something they love. By removing the PSLE, it will free up time for the children to pursue their interests, and teachers can focus on teaching and not chasing after results. This will better match our children's interests as they develop. Let's prepare our children for life and not just to get a degree paper. Finally, we also have to rethink about childcare, because it is another stress point. We have been hearing feedback from the Toa Payoh residents, especially those living in the newer blocks, that there are insufficient childcare centers in Toa Payoh. How can this be? Shouldn't childcare facilities be part of town planning? We need the government not to just throw money at encouraging childbirths. Our current childcare policy is like using plasters. Got problem? Plaster with money. Got another problem? Plaster with tax credits or more leave. We appreciate the plasters, but we need the government to think on every level how to support the family, and that means putting the needs of our children front and center. Bishan Toa Payoh, the PAP MPs hear you, but they want you to listen to them. They let you talk, but they speak down to you in the end. The PAP government believes it is right, and that any compromises in their plans and policies will spell doom for Singapore. How can this be? Do they hold all the talented people in Singapore? Friends, the PAP government has for so long restricted ideas from the ground, and that's why they restricted our growth. Don't let them do that anymore. Be the new pioneer generation. Stand up, make a decision so that your children and your children's children can feel that Singapore isn't a city. The SPP team is in this together. You are not on your own. We will be like Mr. Cham Si Tong.
Please rise, Mr. Cham Si Tong.
Cham Si Tong, the credible opposition in Parliament. Cham Si Tong. Cham Si Tong. Cham Si Tong. Cham Si Tong. Don't be undecided anymore. On polling day next Friday, give us your vote. Give us the opportunity to serve you. We hear you, we speak for you. Thank you.